By 2016, Krasimir would face one of his most formidable opponents yet, in the now undisputed number 1 of the world, Levan Saginashvili. The two met during a match in the European Championships, and it was clear that Georgian Holak was, even then, already much larger than Krasimir. Nevertheless, the athlete slipped, and Krasi stopped Levan in the straps on the inside. From there, he worked on Levan in typical Kostadinov fashion, and fouled him out twice for the win. The Russian juggernaut Denis Iplenkov has been gripping people's attention in the strength world for a long time now, and for good reason. But how exactly did he manage to get such a strong foothold, arm hold, on the arm wrestling scene, and what are the ups and downs in his career? I am the arm historian, and today I'll be your tour guide as we take a look at the rise and fall of Denis Iplenkov. Who's that arm wrestler? It's Vitaly Laletin.
You talk a lot. I'm ready right now.
Hello. Welcome to the Arm Historian Live. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be. Hope you're having a wonderful Sunday. Welcome all, one and all, to the Arm Historian Live. Let's see who's in chat. Tomer, how you doing, man? The Drew, what's up? Arsher, good to see you. Welcome. Okay, what's on the docket today? I'm gonna jump right into it. A couple of things I wanted to talk about, some updates as far as East versus West, the 21st edition goes, and then also some drama happening with Georgia versus World. We already touched on it a little bit during the last live stream, but I'm going to be getting a little more into it during this live stream. So, hope you all are doing well. We'll also touch on a couple of other things as we go through the live stream that's been happening in the arm wrestling world during the past week. And yeah, that's about it. Let's get some music going here. Here we go. Little music for you guys. Armenian arm wrestler, how you doing? How are you guys? You all doing good? Get some coffee going here. So yeah, I touched on it. I don't know if anyone's following me on social media. I made a short about this. We'll start with Georgia versus World. There have been some controversies brewing here. For those of you that don't know, Georgia versus World is kind of a fledgling organization. They've put on their first event, which they've put out to the world, was successful, seeing as they already announced several matches for their second event, as you can see right here, like Petkilyoniani versus Boris Poshka, and a couple of other matches, right? Here we see another match. Whoever these guys are going to be facing each other. Tutberidze versus Steinov. Some pretty big names if you're deep into the arm wrestling world. So what we can kind of deduce from that is their first event was successful, and they're going to go ahead and produce a second event. Now, where the rub kind of comes in is that several athletes have come out during the last couple of weeks saying, we haven't been paid yet. There's Maxim Bitterov, I think is also known as Akimbo, is one of the most popular arm wrestlers who's come out saying they haven't been paid yet. And then there's a couple of other ones here and there who've put out some stuff about not being paid. Now, I want to show you a short I made on this not too long ago that will kind of illustrate what I'm talking about here, right? I'll stop the music for a second and I'll show you the short. I'll let you guys see it and hear it, for those of you that haven't. Yeah, here we go. So have you heard this? Georgia vs. World is already teasing a second event, but some athletes from the first one still haven't been paid. Multiple arm wrestlers say they're still waiting for their payment months after the event has ended. Instead of clearing that up, the promotion is already pushing their next event. In a sport where athletes rely on every bit of income to stay competitive, not paying arm wrestlers is one of the ways to lose trust with the community. Of course, this isn't a unique case in the arm wrestling world. Many promotions have done this before, and it's even become quite of a trend. If Georgia vs. World wants to grow into a real global league, they need to take care of the basics first. Pay your athletes and only then book your second event. So yeah, that was me kind of going off a little bit on Georgia vs. World, because I think, paying your athletes the money you promised them in order to participate in your event should be one of your top priorities, right? At the top of your list. And I think in a lot of cases that did happen, right? Because we see some athletes like Ryan Bowen who will be involved again with the second event, it seems. So I'm assuming Ryan, for example, did get paid. But then there's a couple of other athletes, like I mentioned before, like Akimbo, a couple of other dudes, even one who I showed here, who didn't get paid. In the case of Akimbo, I think some new news has come out about his contract stating that he would be earning $5,000 in order to participate in the event. Now, what I've seen, and this is alleged, right? This is something I've read and I've seen in like Instagram stories put out by Georgia vs. World and Akimbo's management or sponsors, is that Georgia vs. World is saying that Akimbo didn't quite live up to the expectations they had of him, didn't promote the event enough, so hasn't really earned his appearance fee. If that wasn't stated clearly in the contract that he needed to put out X amounts of videos or talk about the event in a certain way or have a certain time span that they wanted him to talk about the event, if that wasn't stipulated in the contract, but the $5,000 that he was meant to earn from attending the event was stipulated in the contract, then I think it's pretty clear here who's the party in the wrong, right? I'm saying if here, I'm like trying to remain a little bit objective about the case and not go like off on Georgia vs. World and just condemn them because not all the details have come out, right? But I think there is a trend forming of several other athletes too that haven't been paid by the event yet. And that is a serious problem, in my opinion, and it's one of the main reasons I made this video. This is a major problem for the event and something they should try to address as quickly as possible. Now, I'm going to take a quick look here at Georgia vs. World at their Instagram page, because I don't think they've really publicly addressed it, right? At least as far as I could tell. No stories right now. No reels here. Let's take a look at their Facebook page. Nothing talking about it. Like here's Gennady trying to raise some more money with a giveaway or something. But yeah, as far as I can tell, the second event is still planned to go ahead. And they haven't publicly addressed this. Major issue, in my opinion. Hey Chuck, how you doing, man? Welcome. Good to see you again. Good to see you again. DJ USA says successful isn't the word I would use. I agree. The only reason why I use the word successful is, like I said, because they're going ahead with Georgia vs. World 2. So I don't know what their rationale is here. Maybe they did make enough profit where they could go ahead with the second event, but judging by the fact that they seemingly still haven't paid some of their athletes, I would say that, yeah, the event wasn't a success, right? Going by that metric, you could safely say that the event wasn't a success. Now, like I said, they've kind of come out with the reasoning being that certain athletes didn't live up to the expectations they set for those athletes. But at the end of the day, I think it's safe to say, like you alluded to here, that the first Georgia versus World event wasn't a success, judging by that alone. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about like the production value or the matches they set, stuff like that. I'm sure there's plenty to complain about there. But I'm just mainly talking about the financial viability of the event going forward, right? And I do think, like I alluded to in my video, this is not like a unique case in the arm wrestling world. There's been plenty of events in the past who went straight down the toilet because they couldn't pay their athletes. And the amount of negative press they received was so massive that their reputation was damaged beyond repair. And I think it kind of looks, at least now, preliminary, like it's happening to Georgia versus World 2. Tomer says, I think Gennady is trying to do Georgia vs. World 2 in order to make money so he can pay the athletes. I think that's his plan. Of course, he would need to make a profit, which is unlikely. Yeah, it's another very good point. Gennady and Go, I don't know who else is involved with the project, because as far as I can tell, this isn't something that's been transparently put out there. Is probably looking for more sponsors for the second event, trying to keep the illusion, if you ask me personally, alive, that the event is doing well, going ahead, and they'll make more money then, and will be able to pay off their debts to athletes, if it is indeed the case that athletes haven't been paid, at least certain athletes. Because I would figure that some athletes who have high enough visibility, they're gonna want to pay, right? Like Ryan Bowen, who has a big social media following. But then the thing is, Akimbo is one of their biggest draws, I would think, to their event, because Akimbo has a very big social media following. So it's kind of weird that they didn't even pay Akimbo. Now that could have something to do with the fact that probably the 5K that they promised Akimbo was one of the biggest appearance fees of all their athletes, right? I could imagine something like that, where we just can't cover the 5K, so we need a way to kind of get out of that, or delay the payment for a while, right? So yeah, all very interesting, and not in a good way, at least not for Georgia vs. World, and I don't think for like the credibility of arm wrestling as a whole, or at least the competitive scene as a whole, you know what I mean? If promotions such as this can't figure out a way to be financially viable, or can't figure out a way to at least pay their athletes in time under the agreed upon contracts, then that doesn't bode well for any fledgling organization, you know what I mean? Because there were quite a bit of people involved with Georgia vs. World that held a lot of credibility in the arm wrestling world, and that's probably one of the main reasons why the event would go ahead in the first place. So yeah, this doesn't bode well. This isn't a good sign for competitive arm wrestling in general, and certainly not for Georgia vs. World. I'm not a big personal fan of Georgia vs. World. It's not like I'm like dying to see the next event, but I am a big fan of having a lot of arm wrestling promotions, letting the fans choose what they want to watch, giving them more options, and the more arm wrestling tournaments or events that are financially viable, the better it is for the sport at large. Just a good sign. If you can get a new tournament off the ground and make it financially viable, I think that's a good sign for the sport. But judging by this, yeah, not really happening. Georgia vs. World bit off more than they could chew, says Harsher. It does seem that way. Homer says, I don't know why they didn't pay the more popular athletes, because they are the ones with a voice. Of course, every athlete should be paid. If you can't pay everyone, just pay the ones with a voice. Yeah, and I think to a degree they did that, right? Because you aren't seeing every one of the athletes coming out with, they didn't pay us. I think they just maybe overextended a little bit and overpromised a little bit on what they would be paying some of the more popular athletes. Harsher says Bowen didn't get paid. They made a deal with him where Georgia vs. World would pay for tickets and accommodation. Has this been confirmed by Ryan Bowen himself or by Georgia vs. World? I'd love to take a look at that if it has. Brad Butler, how you doing? Says, hey Army Historian, I haven't caught you live in a while. Hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, brother. Just a little busy. That's why some of the new uploads have been kind of postponed, but new videos will be dropping soon for those interested. But very glad you could make the live stream here. Chuck says anything Bowen takes part in is deemed to fail. Well, you could argue that. I don't personally think that's the case. Certainly it seems like Bowen is still all in, right? I heard something about he's coming back for the second event, so yeah. Hey Vladimir, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Says finally Alijan isn't getting closer to a match. Yeah, that's another thing. Or maybe you said is getting closer to a match. We touched on it a little bit on the Alijan drama. I haven't really kept up with it, so if there's some updates on that, feel free to kind of tune me into that one. Harsher says they could have saved money on renting an arena and have the event in Gennadi's backyard instead. I'm a big proponent of keeping certain things to a minimum, and I think if they... I said this when the first event was coming out. I think if they approached the entire thing with a little different priorities, it could have been a lot more successful. Now, I'm no expert at organizing arm wrestling events, so take what I say here with a grain of salt, but I think if they rearranged their priorities a little, invested a little more time in transparency and keeping things a little bit more minimal, less matches, for example, would be a good start there. I think they could have turned a potential profit, or yeah, it couldn't, maybe it wouldn't have ended the way it did, right? Chuck personally can't understand Gennady as much as I know he had a great job and could arm wrestle. East versus West with a love from the community. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a weird way to kind of step away. Maybe he went all in when the entire rift happened in East versus West with a lot of the Eastern guys. Maybe he saw an opportunity there that he wanted to jump on and do it his own way, but kind of underestimated everything that went into it and the financial viability of the entire endeavor. I don't know. That's pure speculation on my end, but that does seem like a realistic possibility here, right? Mr. Green says, if Akimbo was such a big draw, they would have made enough money on the event. Seems that didn't happen. Social media numbers can be manipulated. I wouldn't pay athletes based on that. Yeah, I hear you. I wouldn't say Akimbo's social media numbers are manipulated or anything like that. I have no clue if that's the case or not. My first guess would be they're not. But like you mentioned, I don't think having a big social media personality in your event is a guarantee for success. Certainly not. I would agree there. Michael says, Gennady probably thought that he could repeat the success of East vs West just by getting athletes to pull there, but promotion is much more important. Yep. And I think the promotion part of these events is often, of these kinds of events, I should say, is often lacking, right? I've talked about it so many times before, like, the things you do leading up to your event are as important, if not more important, than your event itself, right? Accessibility to transparent information, your entire marketing strategy leading up to the event, how much time you have to plan the actual event, searching out a viable venue that isn't going to cost you way too much. Like, I think they rushed the entire thing, kind of wanted to capitalize on the big drama that was happening and the rift that was forming within the arm wrestling world, and wanted to jump on that. And while that may be, like, on the surface of things, might be a smart decision to want to jump in on that and kind of fill the void that was left because of all the drama, I think it led to a lot of things being rushed and a lot of things leading up to the event having been ignored, you know what I mean? Or just not handled in a decent way. They made the event when emotions were running high, says Harsher, and it would have been better to take their time and think things through. Exactly my point, yes. Arm Wrestling News apparently talked about Ryan making a deal. Okay, that's interesting. Harsher says, I still expect the Georgian fan base to support this event, which surprisingly didn't happen. Well, I think it might have happened. The Georgian fan base might have supported the event. But you have to be realistic, right? How many people live in Georgia? 3 million? 4 million? Something like that? How many people of those are going to be arm wrestling fans compared to other countries, like relative to their population size? That might be a quite high percentage, right? But in absolute numbers, I don't think it's that much. Plus, spending power of Georgia might not be as high as some other more Western countries or even Eastern countries. So just relying on a fan base of the country you're hosting it in, or the countrymen of the organizers, certainly wouldn't be enough. And I would think that Gennady and other people involved in the organization would have realized that, right? I'm sure they thought of, okay, just having the Georgians on board isn't going to be enough to make our event financially successful in any way. Tomer says Gennady injured his wrist in 2018, or around that time, now injured his biceps. He can come back from that. His bicep insertion is halfway up his humerus bone. Shame he can't compete anymore. I don't know if that's the case, that he can't compete anymore. It could lend some credence to the fact that maybe that's one of the reasons he's trying to take more of an organizational role instead of an active competitor role, right? Chuck says Georgia versus World still fails at basic things. Facebook site and YouTube membership are not inviting anyone, at least East versus West in its beginning, at solid foundation with core sports and having enough legitimacy. Yeah, I touched on that a lot with these kinds of events. I think they're missing the mark on a bunch of stuff that should be, in theory at least, pretty easy to accomplish, right? Just there was so much confusion on how to even get the pay-per-view, where to watch it, how much it would cost. I saw prices fluctuating in the weeks leading up to the event. There was so much miscommunication and missed communication that I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot, right? And now with the whole drama coming out about them potentially not paying athletes, still having not paid athletes, yeah, that's just putting more dents in an already very fragile reputation. So Georgia versus World, dead in the water before it even really could take off? I don't know. Too early to tell, I think. We'll know more if this second event happens and how it will do. But I think it's fair to say so far a very rocky start. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to discourage anyone from organizing an event or putting on an event or trying to elevate the entire arm wrestling community by organizing these kinds of events. I think we should have more of them, but just, yeah, done in a little bit of a better way, I would think. Atlantis, what's up, man? Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Mr. Green says, all great points I'm hearing. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on this. For those of you that maybe don't visit the live stream all that much, I'm always trying to make it a constructive dialogue along with the chatters, along with you guys, because that's basically why I'm doing this, right? Why I'm doing this every Sunday is to kind of touch base with the arm wrestling world and keep up to date on more recent stuff that's been happening and how people are viewing those things. Because, okay, I do scroll on social media from time to time. I look through Reddit, through Instagram, even sometimes through Facebook recently, to kind of get an idea of where people's heads are at as far as the competitive arm wrestling scene goes. But these Sundays are like very vital for me personally to get a one-on-one kind of. That's how it feels sometimes. idea of how the community is really thinking about things. So I'd love to hear some of you guys' thoughts. Like, what do you think of Georgia versus World itself? Have a lot of you guys bought into the idea of this event, or do you see it as like a flash in the pan that will be kind of gone before it really actually kind of found their footing? Or what are you guys thinking about this? Hey, Spacey, what's up, man? Good to see you. Long time no see. Atlantis said that Georgia versus World supposedly not pay some folks yet. Yeah, I'll reiterate really quickly for those of you that just jumped into the live. The talk going around now is that Georgia versus World allegedly still hasn't paid some of their athletes, which includes some of their higher profile athletes. So yeah, that's where we're at now. But they're still seemingly, like we see here from their Facebook page, moving right along with the second event. Right, there's a lot of speculation why that is, whether it's just a way of them trying to recoup some of the money and finally paying their debts. I don't know if that's the case. Yeah, that remains to be seen, right? Let's take a quick look at Akimbo's page, because I don't know if Akimbo himself is really talking about this a lot. But I do know his management has kind of talked about that. It seems like Akimbo himself is staying pretty far away from the entire thing and just letting his sponsors or management kind of take the discussion there, which I think is a very smart thing to do. I think if I was Akimbo, I'd do the same thing for sure. Jacobin says, pretty good event, but Gennady needs to pay up. Roman really messed up this time. Yep, Roman is another person deeply involved with the event. Like I said, there hasn't been a lot of transparent and open communication from Georgia versus World, as far as I can tell. So, I don't know. All of this is speculation at this point. I want to emphasize that. I'm not saying they're doing a terrible job or whatever you think, whatever you might think I'm saying, like as far as they haven't paid athletes and stuff like this. I'm not saying this is for sure, you know what I mean? This is all speculation based on the posts that I have seen from athletes involved with the event. I think it's credible. Personally, I think it's very credible, but I just have to reiterate and emphasize here, this is alleged, right? I don't want to get sued by Georgia versus World for saying whatever about their event. This is all alleged. So time will tell, right? Mr. Green says, Georgia is a great arm wrestling nation. I don't know many of the pullers, so I have no connection. I would need guys I'm connected with to buy an event. Yep, I get that. I think it's hard as a starting event. You want to get headliners to your event. You have to pay them a lot, because obviously people with a big following in the arm wrestling world, those people who are going to get most of the pay-per-views in, also costs a lot of money to hire for your event. And if you don't do that, you run the risk of everybody saying, why should I even watch these events? I don't know 90% of the guys participating in it. Why should I even care, right? So I'm not saying it's easy to organize a successful arm wrestling event. I think it's an incredibly hard thing to do. And a lot of factors play into it, I'm sure. But I do think there's some glaring issues that they could have addressed. I think they were maybe a tad naive in their approach to organizing such a big event with so many quote-unquote big names in their event. Paying 5k to one single puller out of however many pullers they had, like 30 or something, in their event, seems already like a really big cost to me. Especially for your very first event, you know what I mean? Peter Nordberg says, please check my first comment, which was, hello, what do you think of Bowen's statement? I think it's shitty. Bowen said, as long as I'm paid and get matches, I'm gonna talk good about the organization. Doesn't matter apparently if they do others wrong. That's a tough one for me. I kind of get where he's coming from there. Like, I think it's a fair standpoint from him. It's like a fair stance to take from his perspective, in the sense that they haven't done him anything wrong. So he's kind of saying, I'm staying out of the drama. They've paid me. They've lived up to their contractual agreements with myself. So to me, it's just a job. So I don't have anything wrong to say about my employer because he took care of me. Now, of course, there is an ethical side to that question too, which I think should play into it to a certain degree. I also think it behooves Ryan to kind of think of his own reputation in this entire equation. I'm not saying Ryan should take a step back from Georgia versus World or talk bad about what are essentially his employers. I don't think you can expect that from Ryan Bowen. But I do think there are some, and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, right? But I do think there are some ethical implications that it would behoove Ryan to kind of think about as far as his own reputation goes. So, difficult question. I appreciate you for asking me, but that's kind of my view on it, right? I'm not going to sit here and blame Ryan for not talking bad about his employers. If they've done him good, if they've done good in his book. But yeah, there are some other things for Ryan to consider for sure. I agree there. Roman is a bad actor, I see Harsher saying here. I don't know. I don't know enough about Roman to know if he's acting in good faith or not. I would assume he is and wants to grow the event in the best way he sees fit. But like I said, I just think they took a very naive approach to organizing this event and expected a lot more support than they actually got. And I think it might, listen to me, and I sometimes find myself in a similar situation where I'm so ingrained in the deepest level of the arm wrestling community with die-hard fans surrounding me, talking about great matches they want to see, seeing a lot of great people on these cards that people who are deeply entrenched into the arm wrestling world love to see on the table, right? To the average viewer, because the average viewer, that won't matter. I think a lot of people who are this deep into this sport kind of lose track of that sometimes and think that what they see around them and the people that they have in their little bubble represents the entire arm wrestling community. While in reality, the people we see discussing these things here is only a very small percent of the people you need to have watch your event in order to make it financially successful. It's only the tip of the iceberg of people who are watching the sport and who can potentially be watching the sport. And I think a lot of events fall in that same trap of thinking, okay, we've got a lot of support from the arm wrestling world, a lot of people are praising us, a lot of fans will be into these matches, which is true, but then they forget about the actual biggest majority of viewers who are, at the end of the day, casual viewers, who don't give two shits about you having even Kostadinov versus Statiev in your event. Just to name the first people I see here listed as participating in the first Georgia versus World, the majority of viewers won't give a damn about these people pulling. They haven't even heard of these people. To us, it's very normal to see these two guys and think two people who have been entrenched into the sport for a very long time. Some would call them legends of the sport. People who, it might be a really great match. We want to see them pull. We're really invested in their like trajectory through the sport, but to like 90% of potential viewers, the people you need to make your event a success, they don't care about these kinds of matches. That's just, from my perspective, that's just reality. That might be a controversial take in circles who are deeper embedded into the sport, but from my perspective, people like the casual viewers, the 90% of viewers, isn't going to buy into your event for this match. So you either need to find a way to create more of a storyline, create more hype around these people, try to reach more people of the casual viewership and get them to care about those, or you need to find different athletes to kind of front your event. Athletes that people who are more casually invested into the sport will actually want to watch. I'm saying this as if it's an easy thing, but it's not. I'm not like making any illusions about like, oh, this is very easy to do and they should have just done X or Y and it would have been solved. That's not the case, I think. That needs a lot of planning, a lot of marketing strategy, needs a lot of time to build up. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest like ways an event can fail, by kind of only looking at it from the perspective of the diehards of the sport, right? The people you're surrounded with when you're that deep into the sport. Sometimes you need someone to kind of take you a step back and kind of show you like, most people who you want watching this pay-per-view, who you want buying this pay-per-view, don't care about these athletes. I'm using Krasimir here and Tatiev as like just an example because they were the first one who were on my screen that I could see, but I do think it kind of illustrates my point here to a degree. Vladimir says, I used to like Gennady, maybe he can come back and get really fit again. Yeah, I hope so. I don't wish any ill on any organizer or especially athlete. I think Gennady is a very entertaining guy on the table and even to a degree off the table. So yeah, I do hope as well that he would return to the competitive scene, you know what I mean? Let me catch up on a couple of chats. Ryan has made a video saying what Georgia versus World should do in order to pay the athletes. Interesting. We could watch a little bit of that later in the live stream. Spacey says, I don't think it's Ryan's responsibility to denounce anyone, but he often takes a principled stand, so it comes off as hypocrisy. I can see that, for sure. Yeah. You're saying he's not being consistent in his views and in the way he approaches things, and I think that's a human trait, right? Especially if money is involved and if your livelihood is involved. I think that's a very human thing. So I can't really blame Ryan for being maybe a tad hypocritical in that situation. Peter Nordberg says, on other notes, thoughts on the new format of the next East versus West events. Would that affect pay-per-view? Yeah, we'll get to that for sure. I'm about ready to kind of round off on this whole Georgia versus World talk we're having here. And I'll be moving on to some new things that have popped up around East versus West, for sure. Chuck says, I got into arm wrestling fast and quite hardcore. But yeah, Devin is moneymaker. Devin also does a lot to promote matches on the card, not only his, which can make people interested. Yeah. I'm not necessarily talking about just the Devons of the arm wrestling world. I do think there are other people who you could develop into kind of being a front for your event, and with the right social media strategy, the right marketing strategy, you could turn into the Devon of your event, you know what I mean? Not an easy task, probably requires multiple events. That's why it would probably be good for starting events to keep the scope low, keep the scale low of their event, kind of small. But I do think there's other ways to go about it, and because they can't afford like a person like Devon for their first events, you know what I mean? But I do think there are other ways to go about it. They just take more time. Yeah, and more thought put into it. Hey Spinner, how you doing? Good to see you. Vladimir says Gennady is delusional, levels above most pullers. I don't know. Like in my opinion, they were just sort of naive in how they approached the event. Jacobin says learned that Milo does not like people talking about his mom. That makes sense to me. So yeah, Georgia versus World rant, consider it over. If you want to talk more about it, feel free to drop some messages and I might respond to them. But as far as I'm concerned, there's not really a lot more to say, right? I said my piece on this, and I'll keep it at that for this live stream, because otherwise I'll be going for hours on end just talking about where they potentially went wrong and things like that. But yeah, let's move on. In my last live stream, for those of you that didn't watch it, I talked about East versus West. In some people's opinion, I went a little hard maybe on the event. I think what I said wasn't that out of pocket. I think most of it holds up. And I still feel the same way. I think in the lead up to their event, they could still do a lot more. Their website was severely lacking, still is to a degree. But if you want to kind of rehash that, feel free to, after this live stream, go to my previous live stream and you can get my full uncensored opinions on East versus West and their upcoming 21st edition. Now, I'm not saying they watched my live stream, because I doubt they did or paid any attention to it, but I do have to say they did improve, for example, their official website. They finally got around to updating some of it, where they're now talking about the actual upcoming event and not have like still things about their previous event. And take a look at East versus West 20, which is still coming up, even though it was over for weeks already. And they actually finished, as far as I could tell, their complete card of all the athletes that will be participating. Now, they also added a couple of other things, even like a kind of moving banner here, up here on the website. Like I said, they updated to kind of reflect the next event that will be coming up. They changed their landing page here a little bit. Still a couple of awkward design choices, I feel like, but all in all, I think a big improvement, right? Still don't have an athletes page. A lot of things kind of still missing in my opinion, but the site has been updated and they have improved on quite a bit of things. Now we'll take a look at the matches themselves, all the matches that they've announced. But first of all, I wanted to touch on, and someone mentioned it before in the live stream here in chat, they are kind of changing up the format, where they're actually putting on preliminary matches, which will be live streamed for free on their YouTube channel. So, quite exciting, in my opinion at least. I think pretty good choice. They're tapping into potentially an entire new audience. And they've chosen for these matches Jason Merlot's match, which I'm looking forward to a lot. Gronlund versus Brisson. And then, I think very smartly, Schoolboy versus Bornman on the left arm. So these three matches, as far as I'm aware, will be live streamed for free, I believe. For free, yeah, that's what they're saying. On their official YouTube channel. What do you guys think? Personally, I think it's a great idea. Especially the Schoolboy versus Bornman match. I think there's quite a bit of hype around that match. Schoolboy has a big social media following, very big on YouTube. I think great idea to get people kind of invested, and maybe to tune into the actual pay-per-view once these matches are over. Vladimir says, when will the show begin? At Greenwich time? Let me check. Here are all the times that they put on their website. So in Atlantic City, local time 12 p.m., Pacific Standard Time 9 a.m., Eastern Standard Time 12 p.m., Coordinated Universal Time, that's UTC I believe, something like that, is 5 p.m., Central European Time, that's relevant for myself, is 6 p.m., and then Gulf Standard Time 9 p.m. So these are the times the event will start. Also says the press conference will be live the day before on the YouTube channel of East vs. West Arm Wrestling. And will be announced, the timings will be announced on their socials. So I do think they updated their website. I don't think they watched my live stream, but they might as well have, because a lot of the criticisms that I had during that live stream, they addressed to a degree. So yeah, step in the right direction, I believe. And I'm personally looking forward to this event. Quite a lot. Tomer says, why doesn't the world use GMT anymore? I don't know, man. That's also one of the time zones that I was most familiar with from when I was younger. So yeah, I don't know why it fell out of favor a little bit. Jacobin says, awesome plan. Love free live streams. Yep, I think it's a really good idea. Chuck says, I won't believe if Schoolboy loses it. Interesting. Tomer says, wasn't Jason Merlot on this channel for a live stream on the Fantasy League? Indeed he was. Jason Merlot, a friend of the channel, really great guy. Talked to him a couple of times offline. Well, not offline, but like outside of the public eye, I should say. And yeah, always been a great guy. Really great. He also, when I did my face reveal, he also sent in a video, which I thought was really great. So yeah, love me some Jason Merlot, and I'm glad that he's getting a chance to show off his skills on the big screen. I think he's a very charismatic guy too, so yeah, I hope he does well. Fingers crossed that he's gonna do well. But yeah, those are the changes they kind of put into this event, and I think personally, great choice. Let me check in on the pricing they're going with here. Will be interesting. They still have here on their live East vs. West page, they're still kind of going with the old banner, which makes sense because, yeah, you can't buy the event yet, it seems. Kind of a missed opportunity, but yeah, I get it. So yeah, no news on the pay-per-view price, it seems, although I might have missed it. But in-person tickets, I touched on this in my previous live stream, will be $50 to $195, depending on where you're going to be watching the event from, right? If it's like standing up spots or like sitting close to the action, that's what I'm assuming. You have general admission, silver, and gold. There you go. There you go. There's even some info here. Gold ticket holders will be seated behind VIPs. And then the VIP package, which is a whopping $695. Jacobin says, gonna be a good event. Atlantis says, yeah, I think it's a dope idea. I think it will bait some of us into going ahead and ordering the full pay-per-view. I agree. Archer says, happy for Ayane, good to have her back. Yeah, I love me some Takenaka. I think it's great that they're inviting her again. So, let's take a look at some of the individual matches again, because I do think they added a couple since we took a look at them, like last week. And I do believe they've kind of rounded out all of their matches, right? I think so, at least. Let's take a look at how many there are. I think there's 8 in the actual event, in the pay-per-view event, and then there's 3 in the preliminary event. So a total of 11 matches, as far as I can tell. Like I said, Anna Gronlund versus Jocelyn Brisson. Mayan Sterenga, sorry if I mispronounced that, versus Jason Wine Merlot. And then Schoolboy versus Bornman will be the preliminary matches. All of them on the left arm, which is kind of an overarching theme of this event, and I don't know if it was a conscious decision where they kind of wanted to hype up the left arm a little more and to tap into that. But yeah, there are a lot of left arm matches here. And like, I mean it, a lot of them. Let's take a look. Victoria Carlson versus Ayane is going to be left arm. Bogdan versus Pauline is going to be a right arm match. But then Zeranov versus Sporong is going to be on the left again. Prokopchuk versus Mindaugas is going to be on the right arm. Sonev versus Prudnik is going to be on the left. Then we have a couple of right arm matches. So I think nearly half of the matches is going to be on the left arm, which might be unprecedented. I don't know if we've had an event before where so many people are pulling on the left arm. Now, I see, like, they have a couple of double matches, right? Am I mistaken? I think Schoolboy versus Bornman is going to be on the left and the right arm. So that's something to note here. And I believe they had another one, right? Or am I, like, misremembering? I seem to remember they had another couple of pullers that were pulling on both arms. But I might be misremembering that. Because I don't see any others that are pulling two matches that night, as far as I can tell. Chuck says, I don't like the idea of left and right matches for the same athletes, at least in the same event. Yeah, I hear you. I personally don't mind it. You could have some arguments against it, like they won't be at the top of their game and stuff like that. But I've long held the opinion that I think athletes should be pulling more in general, especially athletes very high in the rankings. In the rankings, should have more matches in general. And we should try to, like, kind of cultivate an environment where athletes don't always need to be at 100% or at the top of their cycle in order to compete. You know what I mean? It might lead to more upsets and stuff like that, but I think in general it would be a good thing for the arm wrestling world, the competitive scene, if we actually encouraged athletes to pull more. Arsh says, I have no problem with left arm matches. A match is a match. I completely agree. I think left arm often overlooked, but is a fine way of tapping into people who are... Their personality is still the same, right? And their spirit on the table is still the same. And I think to a lot of viewers, those aspects are as important, if not more important, than their actual arm wrestling ability and strength. So I think it's a way to kind of elevate those criteria as what would make a good match, you know what I mean? So yeah, I agree. A match is a match, and an athlete is an athlete. As long as they're entertaining, I think it's a great thing that they're putting on more left arm matches, because otherwise you're just missing out on a whole bunch of potential matches. Also a pretty good way to have someone pull multiple times a year that maybe otherwise wouldn't be as inclined to pull that many times a year. You know what I mean? Mr. Green says, thank goodness we don't have Ticketmaster destroying ticket prices. Yeah, agree there. Hard agree there. Left arm deserves more love, says Stomer. I personally think it's more interesting than the right arm right now. Yep, I could see that being true. I could see that being true. Hey, Jason says, whoever gets the second match would question whether or not person A was fresh. Yep, that's a good point. Talking about Mr. Jason Merlot. Jason, can I ask you, how do you feel about being on the preliminary card? Is it at all like do you like perceive it as a slight to you, as like being not important enough to be on like the main pay-per-view card? Or do you kind of just look at it in the lens of, I'm happy to be part of the event and it doesn't matter where they put me? I personally, if you missed the rest of the live stream, what I previously said was I love the fact that they're putting on preliminary matches, so I don't think you should in any way feel like you're less important or anything like that, because I think like those 3 matches that we're looking at right here have the potential to get so many more people into the pay-per-view, which I think is a very important position to be in. But how do you feel on a personal level about this? Tomer says, I feel as though the left arm rankings are unresolved. More matches means a more complete ranking system, which is way better. I agree. For sure. For sure. Talking about rankings, I'd love to see, like, did they update their website with their own rankings already? It seems so essential to put out rankings, right? It seems they did put out a results page, which I haven't seen before, which looks nice, but I still can't quite find rankings. Jason Merlot says, not at all. And it's my first time on East vs. West. Whatever they want to do is what they want to do. I'm going to perform no matter the order or whatever the perceived importance is. I think that's a very pragmatic approach, which I can appreciate. And yeah, that would be, I would probably share the same perspective there. I think these preliminary matches have the potential to be, like I said, even more important, quote unquote important, than the paid for matches in the pay-per-view section. Just for the simple fact that the potential is so high to get more eyes on the sport and get more people buying into the pay-per-view, which at the end of the day is what we all want, right? So yeah, that's very good to hear. He also says, I'm here to pull, put me wherever you want, and I'm going to perform. The fans will be cheering on regardless where I am. Yes, very well put. I'll personally be keeping a very close eye on that match, and I do hope that they enable a live chat during the match, because I'd love to kind of get an idea of where people are at during these live matches. And I hope they keep the view count public too, to get kind of an idea how many people are actually watching the live preliminary matches there. Jacobin says it's a big responsibility. That's true. Some people see and buy depending on the quality of the free show. Very good point. I think it is a big responsibility, and I'll reiterate it once more. In my opinion, these matches have the potential to be more important than the pay-per-view matches themselves. So yeah. The Drew says, free prelims is what I've been wanting for a long time. It works for others like UFC, yes. I agree. I should have been put on way before, but I'm extremely happy they're doing that here. So big kudos to East vs. West for doing that. I think they've updated their website, put in a bunch of new stuff. If they can do this at a faster pace for the next event, even better. And yeah, I hope they'll continue to kind of expand on what they already have in that regard, for sure. As far as the matches themselves, I'll be doing a full prediction live stream one of these weeks, probably the week before the event itself. So that will be 2 weeks, I believe. Let me quickly check here. That will be next week. Okay, so next week, Sunday, during the Arm Historian live stream, I'll be giving you my own personal predictions, as well as I'll be running polls like I always do on each individual match, just to kind of see where the people are at, right, in chat. I'll also be putting a couple of polls up on my discussion page, my community tab of the channel itself, to kind of get an idea, and then I'll be referencing that throughout the live stream. So, something to look forward to there. Other than that, there's like 3 or 4, 3.5, I guess technically, videos I'm working on at this moment, like at the same time. One is very close to being finished, so hopefully that will be online tomorrow or the day after, depending on how far I get with editing and how much time I have. And then there's a couple more. I can say the John Brezink video part 5 is coming out very soon, so something to look forward to there. I'll also be editing down all the separate parts of the John Brezink documentary series that I made into one big video, cutting out the intros and outros, like changing up a couple of things here and there in the videos that I wanted to add or take away, and then releasing it as one big, like hour-long, just about an hour long, a little over an hour, fully fledged documentary on John Brezink. So that's something to look forward to. I'm also working on the arm wrestling iceberg part 2, a lot of kind of factoids and doing a deep dive into arm wrestling culture, so to speak. And then there's 2 more videos, one that will be releasing very soon, the video I was talking about, that will be releasing tomorrow probably, which I won't spoil for you guys, but I've got a feeling it will be a good one. So yeah, as far as the Arm Historian channel goes, that's something to keep your eyes on. And like I said, next week I'll do a deep dive on every single one of these matches, give you my predictions, and kind of go over with chat what they're thinking about the matches. Tomer says, I've just seen a video from Stublin, or Stubline, however you pronounce it, about Dennis speaking out on the Georgia versus World situation. Yep, I'll try to catch up on it a little more. I've seen some people reference the Ryan Bowen video. I need to watch on that, and then I'll put that one in the playlist too, kind of to catch up on it. Yeah, indeed, I hope Jason can take the win, but regardless, I'm just really happy that he's getting the opportunity to pull at East versus West. I think he's one of those pullers that should have been at like the biggest stage. He's been at big events, but I think he's one of those guys that has the potential to do really well on, like, as far as an entertainment factor goes. I'm not even talking about his arm wrestling skills, which I think are high enough to be at this stage, but just from a pure entertainment like perspective, I think Jason is one of those guys that you kind of need to elevate in your events and need to put like front and center in a lot of these events. Yeah, so I'm very glad he's getting the opportunity here, and I'm sure he'll do everything to capitalize on it as much as he can. On a personal level, I'll give you one little like tidbit here about my own thoughts. I hope Jason can win, and I'll be rooting for Jason personally. But yeah, I might be biased there a little. As far as like their main event, I know they've been talking about how it's like a shared main event, like a shared main match between Kaderet versus Jablonski and Svetkov versus Stott. Last time I checked in, they couldn't really decide on who would be their headliner, so they kind of made it sound like it would be a co-headline, but then now I see they've decided potentially to put Svetkov versus Stott as their headline, as opposed to Kaderet versus Jablonski, which I think makes sense. I think it makes sense. Personally looking forward to both of these matches. Kaderet versus Jablonski is like the freak factor, quote unquote, just in the sense of how they pull I'm talking about. It's like through the roof there. Like, how often do you see like 2 of the best wrestlers in the game facing off against each other? Like, imagine if Michael Todd would face like another very notorious Kings mover. Kind of the same kind of match, right? The Fine Wine says, appreciate the support, Arm, and that's what I can bring during the prelim card. Hype and excitement for everyone. I love it, and I do believe you can. Looking forward to that match more than nearly any other match here, if I'm being honest. Another one I'm looking forward to a lot is Stoica versus Lin. I've watched on the Fix, I believe. I've seen Paulin talk with Bogdan Stoica and people kind of speculating about the match, so that's one I'll definitely be keeping my eye on too. Prokopchik versus Tarasatis, kind of a classic match in a way. Looking forward to that one. Always good to see Takanaka. I've seen a lot of people having Ayane as one of their favorites to participate in the event, so I love it. I said it before, I think getting people from countries who aren't necessarily that deeply ingrained into the competitive scene yet is always a good thing. Like I've talked about this before, I think there's large parts of Asia and especially Africa, South America to a degree, that is like largely untapped, has a lot of untapped potential. And I think taking steps like this, getting Ayane Takanaka involved, for example, is a big boon to the sport. Like, that's not to say that Japan has been like not relevant on the big scene and stuff like that, or like not ingrained in arm wrestling culture, because I think they have to a large degree. If you look at the history of the sport, it's undeniable that Japan has been very deeply ingrained into the arm wrestling world at large. Some of the earliest examples that I could find personally in my research of arm wrestling are from Japan. I'll show you quickly here for those of you that haven't seen it yet. I think I made a couple of shorts about it too. Let me see here, yep. Here we go. Like, Japan has been very involved in arm wrestling since the 17th century at least, and probably before that. And as far as I could tell, some of the earliest confirmed sources of actual arm wrestling are from Japan. People often refer to like Egypt and like certain depictions of arm wrestling that they found in tombs of in Egypt and stuff like that, but I don't really look at them as examples of arm wrestling. If you look at them with like a little bit of a skeptical eye, I think you'll come to the same conclusion that probably not arm wrestling that's being depicted there. Although I do know some people have kind of tried to put forward the notion that arm wrestling, competitive arm wrestling, is confirmed to be as old as the Romans and the ancient Egyptians and stuff like that. Like, I'm sure arm wrestling was around and people have been doing it since the dawn of man almost. Something akin to arm wrestling. But there's, as far as I can tell, no confirmed sources. Now, this is a tangent. I know it's not about the main subject of this live stream, but just kind of something I'm personally like invested in. Of course, if those sources would exist, I'm happy to look at them, but so far I haven't been able to find them, or people haven't come forward with actual depictions, confirmed depictions of arm wrestling from those times. Like, the earliest real sources I could find of actual arm wrestling, like here, like you're seeing here, are from 1600s, as far as I can tell. I've done quite a bit of digging. Tomer says the day monkeys start arm wrestling is the day they enter their intellectual age as a species. Until then, they are beneath us. When last did Japan produce a world champion in arm wrestling, says Spinner? Doesn't Ayane hold the world title in WAF? Maybe not. I know Yoshi Kanai, of course, is a multiple times world champion. So certainly Yoshi. And then they also do practice this one here, which some of you may have also seen. Is quite popular in Japan still. So as far as like producing world champions in the modern competitive scene of arm wrestling. Might not be as many Japanese people involved, but as far as like general involvement in the sport, Japan has been in there for centuries, literally. So yeah, don't underestimate Japan. I hope they're gonna come back into the fold of the competitive scene, and matches like this one that we've been talking about, Ayane versus Victoria here, it's one of the things that might like facilitate that to a degree. Yeah, Atlantis, it might have been from a video I made on the subject of like where did arm wrestling actually originate from. You might have seen it there. But yeah, as far as the topics for today, I think I can call it here. It's been a very good live stream, I feel like, a very productive live stream. I've covered everything I wanted to cover, and it's about time, I think, for the fix. Let me quickly take a look here if Neil is actually going live. For those of you that don't know, Neil Pickup runs a live stream called The Fix, and he usually goes live right after I'm done here, and I think that goes for tonight too. And wouldn't you know it, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, he's having Jason Merlot on. So yeah, Jason, if you're going on The Fix, have fun there. I'll be watching for sure. And for those of you guys here in chat still, get your ass over to The Fix right after this live stream has ended. Maybe tell him the Arm Historian sent you, get a cheeky little shout out in there. And other than that, keep your eyes peeled for new videos coming out. And I'll see you next week, same time, same place, for another Arm Historian Live. But until then, Arm Historian, out of here. Bye-bye, guys.